Yeah. Oh no, I'm off-centered. How dare I? All right. Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Designer's Den. Today I have Thomas Valley on, and you might know him as the D&D Adventures League coordinator from GaryCon, or from MegaCon, or from, there's just a lot of conventions. Thomas, thank you so much for being on today. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Mhm. Thomas, hold on. I am being told that they can't hear you. So this is probably gonna be. I know. Let's see. Oh. All right. How about you talk again? No. One day, I'm gonna. Okay, there we go. Everyone should be able to hear Thomas now. Let's start over. Thomas, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you? Yeah. No, sorry. I'm on the wrong show. um. Nope. God damn it. Sorry. Audio input capture, that's me. Desktop audio, that's Thomas. Visual audio. You wanna say something? Why? Alright, one sec. Let me just unmute thing. Jaunty music. Alrighty. Try again. Why am I so bad at this? I'm so sorry. Yeah, I know, it's time for favorite game of the quarantine. Why are we having technical difficulties? I see the meter moving. Thomas is live. Okay.
Yes. Hello.
Welcome to episode 2 of The Designer's Den. Technical difficulties part 2. I'm going to get this figured out eventually. We have Thomas Valley today. Thomas, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you can hear me now. Um,
Sorry.
uh, yes, it's all Jenny's fault. So I am a gamer from my first D&D experience was in 1978 when I was 9 years old, and I've been playing ever since. Um, I used to mark every year growing up by when Gen Con was taking place, as I lived in Eastern Iowa, born and raised. Um, we moved to Wisconsin in my mid 20s with our kids, and uh, about 6 years ago, we moved down to Florida, and I now work for a certain mouse-based corporation. And that's about it for me. I'm still playing D&D, still running games,
Indeed.
um, and I typically I got involved. So when we moved down here to Florida, I was deeply involved in the very nascent Adventurers League organization in Wisconsin. And when I began to inquire in for local resources down here, um, I was told by the then regional coordinator, hey, nobody's really running the show down there in Florida. Why don't you do it? And that'll teach me to
I'll
ask
teach you
questions.
to ask questions.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and that actually is how I originally met Thomas, through the Adventurers League program. He was the coordinator for Florida, and then when I came on as a coordinator in the same region, we interacted, and then I graduated to being his boss. And it turns out, occasionally Thomas is good at following directions. Now, his wife might disagree.
Sure.
Okay, well, so we've got a couple of adventures here that we're going to talk a little bit about. So you wrote for GaryCon, where you do some of the Adventures League. You wrote some of their CCC, right?
That is correct. So when the CCC program started, I was assisting with GameholeCon, and I was the editor for the first CCCs that came out of GameholeCon, written by Alex Kammer and Ed Greenwood. Um, and I really got into my head that, hey, this seems possible. So I was already running the Adventurers League room for Luke Gygax at GaryCon. And so I talked to him and I said, hey, let's do something different, because this is fifth edition and GaryCon is an old school con.
Mm-hmm.
Let's marry the two. So Luke and I wrote the first three CCs together. And then the next year, 2017, I wanted to continue that and picked out and got an agreement with another old school author. Um, and then got pretty deep into the process of writing. And he had some PR problems, and was basically shunned by the community and kind of left me hanging. So my friend Joe stepped in as a co-author for those. Those actually worked out quite well, and they were designed to be part of a very long-term story. And we followed that up in 2018. I co-wrote the CCCs there, with another old school author, trying to keep up the theme. And then last year, we announced a set of authors, a whole a wide breadth of authors. We wanted to create two trilogies, and have different authors for each. And the gimmick, as it were, in that is that Luke and I had a conversation before the GaryCon prior had ended. Um, and Luke and I both came to the same conclusion at the same time independently, which is, hey, this is great and everything that what we're doing, but in our hobby, it sure would be nice if we didn't hear from old white guys anymore, because they've pretty much had the stage for the last 40, 45 years, right?
Right.
So all of our authors for this last time of building CCCs and potentially illustrating for them were all women, and specifically women of color, just a diverse background. We wanted to feature the voices of women, um, as an opportunity.
Right.
Uh, and really just trying to reflect a sea change that we've seen in the hobby. Uh, just the idea that inclusivity uh, beats gatekeeping every time, um, both from a pragmatic financial standpoint as well as happiness and love at the table, which just makes a happy gamers all around. So anyway, that was a great idea. Uh, Execution, not so great, because our little friend COVID-19 came along, um, and we were able to run the first trilogy of that series at virtual
Mm-hmm.
GaryCon, which was sort of assembled at the last minute, but which was
There
successful.
were a lot of things assembled at the last minute when the pandemic started.
Oh yeah, yeah. But then the second series kind of wallowed, and it kind of wallowed because we'd made an arrangement to run that second series at Dragon Con in Atlanta. Um, and Dragon Con in general waited until the very last minute to announce that they were going to go virtual.
Yep,
Uh,
that is true.
yeah, up until the week where they declared that they were going to go virtual, their website said, "See you in 2021." So all of the authors for those modules had pretty much just kind of given
Given
up.
up.
You
Yeah.
know, there was just no hope that it was going to happen. And then when Virtual Dragon Con was announced, there just really wasn't enough time to turn that around and get product into DM hands. So we do have another trilogy that is unpublished and unfinished. We'll be seeking a home sometime next year, I'm sure.
Well, possibly we'll be seeing it unveiled then at GaryCon next year.
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe.
Okay. Well, let's take a second, and I want to talk about the not the first three GaryCon adventures, but the second trilogy that you worked on. So it's Darkness of the Mountains, Shadows of the Trees, and The Death Beneath the Roots. So you took a little bit of a different turn with those, and I'll make sure that the links to all of those in just a second. But you took a little bit of a different turn with those. You had an old school author on them, and you had some last minute stuff come up. You said, so why don't you tell us a little bit about like the story behind those and like what inspired them?
So, in my mind at least, there are a number of ways that you can write these sorts of modules. Most of these modules are at the early tiers of difficulty are 2 hour modules plus two optional objectives, making for at most 4 hours of play. Um, so I can tell you from a writer's perspective, a 2 hour module is essentially three encounters,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's not a lot of meat to one of those early tier adventures.
Right.
So that's the challenge: is coming up with an engaging storyline, coming up with an engaging set of encounters that aren't really just putting words around a random encounter rule. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Right.
um,
And
so
it takes a certain skill. I mean, we know
yeah,
the season intros for adventures like tend to be the little 1 hour things, and as we can go back historically looking at them, a lot of them were written by Sean Merwin because he's skilled at doing this.
yes,
But I think you've
yes.
done a wonderful job with your 2 hour adventures.
Thanks. So to combat that, right? One of the things that I've always so there are certain narrative exercises that you can take when you're trying to create a module, and one of them is one that I don't really appreciate, but which is commonly used, which is sidetrack the party, keep them sidetracked, nesting those sidetracks to really make them feel as if they've earned the main storyline, right?
Right.
I I don't really appreciate that because there's no engagement with the players. That we may be able to hand wave around the characters caring about, okay, you'll give me the answer to this, you'll give me the clue to this puzzle, but you need me to go and do you a favor. Okay. And then you get there and you're like, okay, I can do the favor for this other guy, but you want me to do this favor for you. And then you do that 10 times. And now the characters are like, the players are like, I've forgotten what we're doing.
You do that 10 times and you never finish the main quest on Skyrim. I get it. I get
Exactly. Exactly.
it.
And 3,000 hours later, you still haven't completed the main quest in Skyrim. Exactly.
there's no need to call me out like that, okay?
Yeah.
One day I might finish it.
Right. So, so if you're familiar with the phrase um, "act locally, think globally," or "think globally, act locally,"
Mm-hmm.
think about that in narrative terms, right? Um, Say, for example, you've had a good shower thought of an excellent big bad, just an excellent villain, right?
Right.
the excellent villain is not going to take uh, a, he's not going to even take the meeting with the kid who's got the pitchfork, still wearing the flannels that were hand me downs from his father, and who smells like the field, right? He's not going to take that meeting. But he may take the meeting with the superhero who has been the conqueror of all of these things and who's gained a reputation, right?
Hmm.
But you can't start out a story like that. You start out the story as the farmer. You start out the story with a local problem. The local problem can be staged, right? So I had just an example story that I incidentally came up with in the shower this morning. Imagine a small village. This small village has a unique quality about it in that there was this old woman
Hmm.
who it was her time of death, and it turns out she didn't want to die.
Okay.
So she's undead, but she takes care of everyone in the village. She once a month she has this big feast. She cooks up this huge pot of chili and invites everyone around, and they all toast her long undeath, her long unlife, as it were.
Hmm.
But she is known as grandmother to all of the children, and generations of villagers have known her caring touch and her way of making sure that children are fed, that children are loved, and it's just this wonderful idea. And then one day she dies,
Actually dies.
unexpectedly, actually dies, um, and the young adults of the village are startled and kind of thrown into, why did she die? What happened here? She's been undead for so long. So maybe you start investigating that. You start asking questions. You start working on your local problem.
Yeah, was there
The local,
foul play? You know?
yes, yeah. So the local problem may have a local solution, but it will lead you to a much more regional problem. And that regional problem may be that she, as it turns out, she wasn't alone. That that there were senior citizens in many little villages in your region that had the same impulse, that had the same effect. That
Hmm.
over a millennia, war and strife were counteracted by loving forgiveness and sweetness, and had created this almost paradise of living, and that something has disrupted this. And so now you've realized that there's a much larger problem. Well, by this time, you're metagaming level 4. And so now we get into the tier 2 stuff, right? And so this is the kind of narrative idea
Hmm.
that that I tried to engender uh, in these modules, in such that they harken back, and this kind of is gone into in the background for the very first module. They harken back to a series of campaign tournament modules that were published by TSR in the late 70s and early 80s. If you recall the Witch
Right.
King had Orcus's wand. We had a big set of campaign characters that
Hmm.
killed him and took the wand, and it was a big deal. And so all of the H modules and everything went into that, and so I wanted to kind of harken back to that. Now, the Moonsea region that Adventurers League takes place in is not really the region in which that happens. So if you look
Right.
at Forgotten Realms, this is a couple of hundred miles away to the northeast, right? Um,
Right.
so my so my idea was that the Witch King himself basically rampaged over this area, and the diaspora, the refugees from this, settled into the Moonsea region. I'm sorry, thank you. So,
It's okay.
Um, uh, the refugees settled in the Moonsea region, and so the descendants of these refugees are where you start. And so this village that you enter is filled with the descendants of these refugees. Now, like the refugees that come to America, um, as Neil Gaiman nicely set up in American Gods, the refugees that come to America bring their gods with them,
Right.
right? Well, the refugees of the Witch King brought their gods with them in a sense that they actually brought relics.
Yeah, they brought their beliefs, they brought their religious symbols, they brought their amulets
Mhm.
and all of that. So this whole like
And maybe some bones.
those are
So
relics.
yeah, so those are relics, right? And some of them buried them,
Oh,
and you know those bones weren't exactly good, and it may have taken 1,000 years, but yeah, evil has flourished in the dark corner.
Chat's sad that the dog didn't come on stream.
Yeah, she's a husky, and she had to talk when mommy came home. So
No, like they say though, animal interruptions are always welcome.
yeah.
Everyone, it's all doggos are welcome, all cats. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I think you've got a pretty, I don't want to say unique philosophy for design, but it's different than what a lot of newer designers are doing who perhaps don't have the history that you have with D&D, having been playing since the dinosaurs roamed the earth,
Yeah,
or I think that's what you told me the first time.
sure,
I asked.
sure.
So you've got like all of this rich lore and everything that you draw on, and I mean, you would agree then that that's definitely like a huge, huge influence on the way that you approach your adventure design.
So I'm a fan of fantasy writing that tends to get deep into lore, uh,
Mm-hmm.
ancient lore. So something has to do with something ancient lore. I am there. I am right there. One of my go-to novels series when I was growing up, I first read in middle school and have reread every couple of years, is Patricia McKillip's Riddle Master of Head. Um,
Okay.
and it's just fantastic old school fantasy. There are three novels. And if any of you read it, you may understand the impact that it had on me in that my eldest son, who's now 28, is named Morgan. And that's the main character of that book.
Okay.
So lore, to get back to the subject, has always been the thing that really entertains me. And so the funny thing about the D&D environment right now is that we have ancient lore.
We do, we
We
do,
do.
and I think a lot of the um, stuff that's coming out right now is kind of harkening back to some of that older lore. I know, like we've got a lot of the like in well, not to give too many spoilers, but you can see it on a map. If you look in Icewind Dale, we've got a lot of Netherese ruins,
Mhm.
a lot of like ancient rituals and stuff um, that have to deal with Oril. That is not how I pronounce that in my mind, and I hate that. um, and then just like so a lot of the other stuff that's like coming out, so like the Dreams of the Red Wizards pulls back on all of that Thayan lore, and we're even pulling back on some of that more recent lore now,
Yeah.
reaching back to Storm King's Thunder. So it's just like a whole extensive, extensive library. Let's see, being able to pick up lore tidbits built into modules as fun extras for players and DMs both is a really great way to expand on the setting, says Ted. It's one of his favorite parts, especially in story arcs. Um, I mean, I think, I mean, I know I grew up and I got into fantasy from novels, and
Mhm.
as did you. And so I
Yes.
think that like there's definitely like a large, I would say, subsection of the D&D people who like, since we came in with like all of his lore, like that's what brings us in now. Sell us on the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Definitely.
I am a
Definitely.
sucker for a good story.
Yes, yes, and really, there was one of the very early Unearthed Arcana covers was the image, Jeff Easley's image of a wizard with his desk, his messy desk in front of
Mm-hmm.
him. And I always thought that that was a great image of how I felt like a dungeon master. Was like, I've got the books of lore on the shelf behind me, and I will take down the ancient scroll and read to you of this story, and then see how you react. And that's really how I got into uh, DMing rather than playing.
Oh, once you get into DMing rather than playing, you might as well start writing.
Yes,
Let's see. Question actually. So, well, back up here. Um, D Emerald says that he really liked your think globally, act locally, take low tier designer, so he tries to think that way in all of his designs. Um, and let's see, Grim Goblin. Second, and that's a good approach. Just realized I unknowingly used it in that one module I started but never finished. Well,
sure.
so no time like the present to finish that. Then I guess. The
Oh,
question.
really? That's my specialty, starting things and never finishing them. I excel in that. Yes.
You can't see my whiteboard of half finished projects here.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the question was, how far ahead do you really work to plan those threads in your low and mid tier stuff?
So I would say that I plan the end and I start working on the beginning. But it's in that kind of reference, you have to picture it like a family tree. And particularly as an author, you're the genealogist. You know that your common ancestor um, to this idea that you have and you is 6 or 7 generations back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the tier one level, it's just you and your fifth cousin, and you're working on this together. Then you start working on the parents of that and see, the higher power levels. And so every time you get closer and closer to that big bad, to that ending that you've envisioned, you can basically say, if you get too close too quickly, you can say, oh, no, 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 there's a second cousin twice removed that we need to talk about here because that's gonna inform the ending.
I think sometimes you're putting, I think it's hard sometimes to like know like how far out you're going to be able to plan stuff. Some people piece that together a lot better. Starting with the ending is certainly a method that I use sometimes. I know sometimes I also start with the shower idea of, oh, wouldn't it be cool to fight this thing in this weird setting? But now we're gonna have to explain like why are we doing that and how do we get there and what's unique about it? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's the story about why we're fighting
Oh yeah,
the um you know the aboleth in an inland freshwater sea?
yes.
But
Oh, I got to tell you so I have a number of friends that I typically design projects with. These projects never see the light of day, and we may have written outlines and started writing some content on them. But they're projects like we had a house of horrors that was populated entirely by gelatinous cubes.
mhm,
But it was a mad scientist who had figured out how to form the gelatinous cubes into humanoid bodies. So it was still the same gelatinous thing, the abomination, and it would still kind of suck. The way it would feed would be by absorbing things through osmosis, but it was also wearing clothes and acting like the butler. So the party kind of comes into the environment unaware that every creature in this place is a gelatinous cube. Um, so this is like an idea that we had over lunch, and then it seemed great, and we may have even started outlining it, but it's one of those things.
Okay, follow-up question. When you write your trilogies, how do you determine where to chop them into 3 modules?
So, as I mentioned before, the general guideline for encounters is that an encounter takes around 20 minutes. So, 20 minutes with padding is about 30 minutes, right? So, a 2 hour module with character setup and with rewards and with bio breaks and everything should be on the page about 90 minutes. So, that's 3 encounters. Um, and so 3 parts. Um, and really, the encounter is going to be an NPC interaction. So, encounter A could be we walk into the inn, and here are the list of characters that are in the inn, the types of things that they know, the types of questions that they can answer. Encounter two could be you meet the goblins on the road, and you've got the 3 pillar options to either engage with them socially or fight them or do something else with them. And then the encounter three is the big bad for that frame of reference,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so you basically have to figure out, you have to first know where you want to end up at the end of the trilogy and know where you want to start. Then you split it up into thirds, and then you take each of those thirds and you split it up into thirds. So 3 ideas, 3 times. And that's a trilogy of 2 hour modules.
I mean, I think that's excellent advice. I know personally, like, when I'm writing a lot of adventures that you're expecting there to be a lot of role play for your encounter instead of just like combat, 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 combat. How do you decide like how long a role play encounter is going to take?
Yeah, I mean that particularly in the adventure description, you really have to mention to the DM, give advice to the DM on how long the encounters, the this particular encounter will take. So in a convention setting, in particular, you want the DM and the person organizing the convention to be able to schedule that within a meaningful time frame. You don't want a 90 minutes on the page to be scheduled for 2 hours on a convention floor because there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of teardown, there's a lot of buffer, and 2 hours is going to be very, very tight. I have fallen into that trap as a scheduler, um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not fun. Um, uh, so the directive at the top of the section really needs to be clear on where you want to kind of cut the characters short. So the NPCs stop talking, or you really think that you can give out enough information from 1 or 2 NPC interactions to satisfy the players and get them on the road.
Actually, I'm like listening to you say all this and kind of taking it in and you know, learning myself here too. I I know. Wait. Oh Jesus. Sorry. Go. Um, I know when I'm writing encounter ones, like you said, definitely want to put the suggested or recommended time on there. One thing I've been doing a lot of lately is sidebars for like newer DMs. Like a lot of newer DMs, they don't know how to handle exploration. They don't really know how to handle like the various social pillars,
Right.
what do I do, what are some ways that my group can interact with this, like what's okay, like improv isn't something that necessarily comes easy to everyone.
Right.
um
And in fact, I learned my lesson on that early. One of my early modules, published modules, has a set of random dungeon pieces, random encounters. So a little piece of hallway, a room, and a description of what might happen in that area. and there's a dozen of them. And the expectation with the DM is that they either roll randomly on a table for those encounters, or they pick one or two that they like, and they run it within the time frame of the 2 hour module. Um, I got a lot of feedback on that from DMs who spent 6 hours in that section running every single encounter. Not to say they didn't
So,
have a good time. The players had a great time, according to them, but it certainly didn't fit within a 2 hour mod. And I got a lot of feedback. This is not a 2 hour module.
oh my goodness. Yeah, I commiserate with that. Unfortunately, I got a lot of reviews for my season 8 adventure, which was pretty roleplay heavy, and they were all over the place. Over this only took us 20 minutes,
Hmm.
which breaks my heart a little. To
Yes,
this is an 8-hour adventure, and I'm like, I appreciate your
yes,
like enthusiasm there.
yes.
Um,
Like, I'd like to play with those people.
I know, right? I actually played an excellent session of my own adventure at Gamehole Con when it premiered, and the author, not the author, that's me, the the DM like did like such a fantastic job. Like I was, didn't tell him anything, sitting there, mum, playing this silly little Batiri goblin triplet, and then we've got two Italian guys playing these dwarven brothers, and then this poor sixth person who has no idea what they've gotten themselves into, and they're just taking it all over the place. And our DM is just like rolling with it, like made up a whole marketplace scene, added in all these other NPCs because you mentioned something and you mentioned an NPC and the players are going to run with it even if you they're nothing. You had nothing. That's how it works. But like
Oh, incidental sidebars are honestly my absolute delight. I wrote a module for Game Holcon in the Border Kingdoms area that incidentally has a mind flayer in it who is has basically killed everyone and is now hunting the party. But in the sidebar, in the text, if the DM cares to read it, the mind flayer does have a background in that he's been the only one in this building for quite some time.
mm-hmm.
And the building is a barracks, so the building does have a recreation area. And there is a bowling lane there in the recreation area. Um, and if the players challenge the mind flayer to a game, he cannot shirk from that challenge and he will play them because he loves to bowl. And there's just like literally, I had that game run 9 out of 10 times. It was the 10th time when the DM and the players all ran up to the HQ desk and said, "We played for an hour against the Mind Flayer." And it wasn't just dice roll versus dice roll. It was, let's score this thing. Okay, you got a strike. Okay, you got a spare. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they just went off. They had the time of their lives, and I got to tell you, that was one of the best experiences I had as an author.
You know, I God, I just love when like DMs just kind of like just make it up and make it a wonderful experience and everyone's having fun and you never even know that it
Right.
was different than what was on the paper. So um Grim Goblin has been looking through the DM's Guild and noticed there are visibly fewer modules for higher levels, especially from level 15 upwards. Do you know what makes them harder to design and less popular? I think that's actually two separate questions.
Okay. Sure. So I can tell you from a designer standpoint, they're very difficult to design a fulfilling high level adventure. And the reason I say that is that by the time the characters are that high, they're nigh unkillable. That if I've got a room full of beholders and they all shoot their disintegration rate at the same time, there's some guy with an anti-magic spell or a counter spell or you know something there is just going to completely ruin the encounter, and they're just going to walk out of it and dust off their hands and go, okay, what's next? Because they've seen everything and they've done everything. And I, in fact, had a short discussion with Greg Marks over Dragon Con because we ran everything via Roll20. And Roll20, over the thousands of games that it runs on a minute to minute basis,
Mm-hmm.
does in fact publish their randomness on a wiki page that you can look at and see how random they really are. But I tend to think that in the scope of a particular game, you can sometimes get a really good streak. And I shared with Greg the screenshot where one of his big bads in his tier 4 adventure was taken down in one round because the characters got 4 crits in a row.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single big bad that I've written that would stand up to 4 crits in a row from a tier 3 party, let alone a tier 4.
Right.
Like no matter what the challenge rating on it is, like at that point you've got, you know, all of these powerful spells. You've got your high level smites. You're going to be rolling all the sneak attack damage. You just have like so many extra abilities and ways to lay down the
Right.
damage, or so many utility spells to help you circumvent some of that, like, social pillar. Like
Yeah.
maybe you don't have to wheedle the truth out of them because
Right.
you get a good kidnapping and you throw him in a zone of truth.
So here, take for example, I was running a tier 1 module set in the Moonshay for um, it wasn't PAX, it was the one before it, D&D Live,
Mm-hmm.
and a player uh, during a social uh, uh, encounter kept rolling persuasion and insight, and he was getting extremely good rolls. But the people that he was talking to were seasoned politicians
Oh yeah,
that,
you can't fool. Well, you can, but it's harder to fool a politician.
and it's harder to really tell when a politician is telling the truth. And really,
Mm-hmm.
the one thing that I could offer him was the politician in question. He's telling the truth as far as he can see,
As he
as
sees it.
far as he sees it, and he's doing a very good job at communicating that truth to you. Whether you think that's the truth objectively is up to you. But even your natural 20 on an insight check,
Mm-hmm.
you're still a level 1 character. And I'm sorry, but this guy's got decades on you of
He
and you're
knows when someone's trying to get something from him, and he
right.
just like clams up.
Right. So imagine that kind of dynamic, but in a tier 4 situation, right? A level 15 plus situation. How am I, as the DM or the author, supposed to represent that power dynamic unless I am throwing demigods at you?
Mm-hmm.
And then how much fun is that really when you spend 6 hours tactically working out how you're going to, what level you're going to cast that particular deadly spell, and then have the demigod just kind of throw it off. You know?
Right. So D Emerald, says you almost have to come up with some type of environmental or make the creatures resistant or immune to certain things. You can only give them so much HP, so much AC, or otherwise, you're just beaten at a really big pinata.
Right. And what happens more often than not is that the characters overcome the difficulty well before any sort of story resolution can come about.
Right.
I've got a wonderful story about how I was asked to run one of my own modules, a tier 3 module that I'd written during a convention. I was the DM in that case had come down with the flu that day, so I had to step in. Um, and the module itself was centered around a lich who
Ooh.
was originally a court magician in life, and the characters, this is a third mod in a trilogy. The characters had gone through a lot. encountered a lot of very powerful
Mm-hmm.
minions of this lich, and we're about to encounter him uh, at the end. And As it turns out, the lich had left some letters in a desk that the characters had discovered, a correspondence that he'd had with Acererak, um,
Oh.
basically asking for his advice. And Sarah kept telling him stuff like, "You bother me, kid. How did you get this address?" You know, those sort of things, and really not helping him at all. Um, and The illustrator in that case actually um, had a nice illustration of the lich on his bed, with it on his stomach, writing out one of the letters with his legs kind of crossed in the back, and on his wall behind him is a poster of the Dungeon Master's Guide from Fifth Edition. So the nice poster of a Sararak on his wall, and he's like writing a "Dear Sararak" letter. Anyway, so they get to the final encounter, and it's going to be a knockdown, drag out with a full powered lich in his lair,
Mm-hmm.
right? Tier 3 encounter. And the party's like, okay, I ready this spell. I make sure to do this. I cut off a toe and leave it in the other room just in case. Old school trick.
Yeah, because you
Um,
gotta have a body part to recover.
exactly. Um, uh, and, uh, and so they're making all these preps. They get in there and they see him, and the bard just steps forward. He says, "Excuse me," and he says, "Before we start fighting, I just want to know, are you happy?" And literally, it stunned me.
You're like,
I got a little choked up, and I'm so deep into this character, and I'm like, uh,
oh.
no. And they have a discussion. They
Mm-hmm.
start talking about how he's not well fit for the big bad job. He is not a supervillain. He is not any of these things. Um, but the party is at a loss for how they can help him.
We're having a therapy session.
Yeah, and so they finally figure out he was burst out of a crypt. They're going to help him get back.
Okay.
They're going to go help him. They're going to escort him. They're going to take him back to the crypt. They're going to put all the magical wards back on and say a nice little service over his tomb and let him go back to rest.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he, he didn't even have to be persuaded. Tears in his eyes. He's like, "Yes, please, please help me." And in the rewrite for that mod, I sidebarred that. That was an alternate ending because it all worked up to that.
I
And
like
that's like a high tier module, didn't end in combat. Everybody walked away from that table satisfied.
God, it's always so nice when you can wrap it up with a nice little bow. A couple of options on bows. Do you want gold or silver?
Yeah. Back to the original question though, that kind of stuff doesn't come naturally. It doesn't, that's like,
Mm-hmm.
how are you going to write that, right? How are you going to write that situation in? Because high tier players are high tier for a reason.
Right.
They've
Right.
worked for that. They've earned that. So not too many are going to be accepted with kind of a soft, squishy ending like that.
Okay. Just want to break in for a second to let everyone know the raffle is going on, and it's for this beautiful D&D pop socket from the Frost Maiden campaign. Goes on your phone. You can make it a little thing, whatever. If you know what a pop socket is, probably. So you can enter that by doing exclamation raffle. I think the follow up to that question was, why aren't they popular? I think that's a little bit of a misleading statement. It's not that they're not popular, it's that a lot of players, when you think about like percentage wise of like the whole community for D&D, they simply don't get their characters to that level, so there's not as
Right.
much demand for them. Um,
Yeah,
and
in the MMO interface universe, we call that altitis, where you've got, I was guilty of that playing World of Warcraft. I had two accounts filled with characters. And yeah, not too many of them made it to max level or got into rating. which is the equivalent of, tier 3, tier 4 characters in the D&D environment.
Okay. Then the Weary Warlord. New DM just started Friday next week, and I have a wizard who chose to be a necromancer. My problem is I feel like the PHB lacks necrotic options for a low-level wizard to feel badass. Do you have any advice?
Yeah. Necrotic wizards don't really start to shine as far as animate dead until at least fourth level, fifth level, somewhere around there.
Fifth level.
Yeah, because even at third level, um, you're given Witch Bolt and something else. I forget that gives you healing if you kill a monster, and even better healing if you kill the monster with a spell that does necrotic damage.
Right.
But the only real thing that you've got that does necrotic damage is a cantrip, Toll the Dead, right? So it's not really flavorful as far as necromancy goes. But there's no reason that they can't wear their lift boots and black cloak and wear the eyeliner and just be necrotic friendly.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
they're just starting out. Takes a while to master competency over the dead. I mean, if I know if I'm an undead, I'm gonna want someone who's a little bit assertive to tell me to get up out of the grave and come fight
right,
to the death again for them.
right,
So
right.
I
And certainly, the player is certainly already interested in the necrotic uh, path for the wizard. So there are opportunities there. Oh, my background went out. Oh, there it goes. There are opportunities there where the player can simply say after a battle that he's not looting the bodies, he's examining the bodies, not for treasure, but he just wants to make sure he understands how the elbow works, that sort of thing.
how do all the joints fit together? Which
Yeah,
skeletons seem the most sturdy? What's gonna
yeah,
make the best necrotic army for him when he gets to be an all-powerful necromancer?
right, right.
Yeah. So could they maybe have less powerful versions of spells or maybe get items that allow use of, let's say, inflict wounds? So, if you're talking like your home game, yeah, like the
Hmm.
sky's the limit on that. You do want to like be careful that you're not giving your um necromancer like something that's overbalancing the party, but there's absolutely no reason. So when you're talking like Adventurers League, unfortunately, like the answer there is gonna be no. I don't, because I can't think of any items that do inflict wounds.
No, no, but there are a number of flavorful items in Adventurers League modules.
Mm-hmm.
Say in CCC Gary 04, as a certain reward, a story reward at the end of that module, that might be friendly to necromancers.
Might be friendly to necromancers.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, we are, yeah, getting to, okay. So home game DM. So you've got a lot of options. I think that's like an excellent question to take to like a forum of more experienced DMs. So like I hesitate to recommend some Facebook groups because they get real emotional about
Sure.
things. But like the fifth edition D&D group, or even um like Reddit or something like that, and just to like get advice on like if I were powering this down or if I were making a magic item, just to get some ideas and then put your own spin on it. Let's see. D wants to know, do you prefer theater of the mind presentation or more optics centric play?
Well, it depends. So, in this online world that we find ourselves in, I tend to go with Roll20 and D&D Beyond, that combination. Um, and that's because I find it difficult sometimes to really mash into a time limit a tactical battle. And I'd rather be able to have characters discover things by moving their tokens around in a dynamically lit situation. I've always been enchanted by that environment with tabletop with minis and such. But in a tabletop environment, um, minis are kind of ad hoc for me. So I'm 90% theater of the mind. But when we get into a big battle, um, so my home game, we've got a tradition where everybody brings a snack, and it's typically a cookie related snack. And when we need to work out a battle, I'll use my map and some markers and draw out the constraints of the battle, the walls, the tunnels, whatnot. And then the minis are either dice or cookies.
But
And in
really
fact,
small cookies.
yes, yes. And in fact, one of these, uh, uh, Lisa Penrose's module in season 7, she's got a gigantic, huge zombie T Rex.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter was going up against it as a moon circle druid polar bear, having an enlarged spell casted on her. So it was a bit uh, Godzilla versus Mothra type of situation. And to represent that, we had regular size scale minis and 2 Girl Scout cookie boxes fighting each other.
Oh, nice, nice. Support snacks for sure. You know, snacks make excellent tokens when
Yes,
you
they
when
do.
you I generally like when I do run at a convention. So as far as like when I'm running at an in-person convention, I don't draw well. You can
Yes.
ask any of my tables that I've ever ran. I'm not an artist, but you know, sketch out the walls and everything, and then I'll get some Starburst or some Hershey's Kisses or you know any fun size candies, and like, you know, we got a plethora of bad guys here now, and you're going up against this army of red Starburst. These are the most evil Starburst. Look how many of them there are because I'm not eating them. You have to eat them.
I was running a table for an epic at Origins one year, and one of the puzzles had colored gems on the wall, and so the players had to touch the gems in whatever order they needed to be touched based on the clues to the puzzle. So to represent the colored gems, I put M&Ms of the appropriate color out on the map, and I put them out. Look down at the text, look, behind my DM screen, read up a couple of things, look back up, half the M&Ms are gone.
You're like, I needed those for a minute.
Those are for a reason.
uh, let's see. Recommend the DM eat the creatures representing their health. So, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
nibble away at them to let you know how much is left.
Right.
We've
Yes.
only got about half a cookie left on this one. I think, you know, that definitely is one creative way to visualize how much health is remaining. Are they bloodied? Well, half the cookie's gone.
Yes. Yes. Although probably not very friendly in this virus and slash bacteria environment that we
No,
are.
no, but I mean, if you're the DM and you're broadcasting your table from your house,
Oh,
it's
sure.
your cookies, your socially
Yes.
distanced cookies.
Yes. My socially distant cookies.
All cookies must stay at least 6 centimeters apart from one another, unless they all be eaten in
Right.
one big in one big
Right.
handful.
Yes.
But no, I kind of agree. Like, I'm new to this whole like Roll20 thing. Like, I'm sure a lot of other people are, and I'm not. This dynamic lighting and everything, like it's all Greek to me. But I've been able to, you know, throw together some maps, or in the case of Celebration, there were some very very kind people who distributed copies of their
Mhm.
Roll20 rooms for some of the events, and just kind of getting into the being used to. Being able to provide those visualizations. I know when I run a game online, I do tend to, depending on like what kind of game it is, like for all the intro games, I'll run those theater of the mind, like Zoom, voice and video only for the most part, or Discord, you know, whichever. Um, Not really having a gridded map, but I also like to have Roll20 because it's a lot easier to roll your dice into it from your character sheets, and I can just put up pictures for like
Mm-hmm.
aesthetics. like your spooky forest you've got behind you, for instance. Like, I'd have that up so they can be looking at it while I'm describing the scene and everything, just to kind of add to the ambiance of it, while I'm still doing theater of the mind, but still like utilizing some of those tools. And I think that's helpful. All right, well, Thomas, we are coming to the end of our hour. Is there anything else that you want to share with the viewers before we go, or any events that you want to share with them that they should check out that you'll be at or virtually be at?
Sure. Sure. October 9th through October 12th, I am administering and scheduling for GaryCon Autumn Revel. We will have a couple of streamed games on the 9th, including one streamed by my co-host here, Ginny. The other one is with Paige Lightman, who is streaming her authored module for Season 10, The Frozen North. And then there are a number of streamed other events as well on the GaryCon Twitch channel on the 9th. So that those will all be included. Then 3 days of gaming after that. We're also having the Season 10 Epic on that Saturday. So that will be fun. If you didn't get to play it during the D&D celebration, this will be your first opportunity to play it after that.
And it's super fun. Definitely recommend that.
Yeah. And then I just want to remind everybody about a D&D concept called pack tactics. And pack tactics says that when you're within 5 feet of a member of your pack, you get advantage. So take that into your life.
But you gotta have the feature.
Yeah.
But for instance, for your party of kobolds,
we do have the feature. Human pack tactics is a real thing. If you keep those that you love around you, you have advantage on everything you do.
That's a very, very heartfelt, very heartwarming sentiment there. I think that's a good note to close on. So I just want to do congratulations to Dar Jr., the winner of this. I will DM you and collect your information so that I can get this to you. And next week, I've covered it up so I can't see it. Next week, I will be hosting this 4 p.m. same time, and I'm going to have on Darren Anderson, who is the creator for the Dalworth Haven in the Ice setting, which is available on Kickstarter right now. It's a bit of a different take on the Frozen setting, and I think it's pretty cool and pretty interesting. Disclaimer, I am editing for the project, so don't want anyone to get any misconceptions there, but being able to have that early look at it, like, I'm excited about it, happy to be involved. And there's some great content creators on there, like my friend Jonathan Connor Self, who will be on this show in a couple, I can't keep my calendar straight, but in a couple of weeks from now. Forward to that next week, and I just want to thank you again so much, Thomas. Everyone is agreeing here. This has been a great show, very well thought and thought-provoking, and as always, it's so lovely to chat with you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. That's going to be it for this episode. Until next time.